All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the March 2025 Water Conditions Monitoring Committee. My name is Emily Adrid, and I'm with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. Today, we have a pretty tight schedule. Along with our presentations from the Colorado Climate Center and NRCS, we're going to have our spring 2025 flood outlook from Kevin Hauk from CWCB, and then another report out from Pat McDermott, who works at the Division of Water Resources in the Rio Grande Basin, and he's going to give us some local updates on how conditions are looking in his area. So I will pass it over to Russ, who can start us out today.
Okie doke. Let's see here.
Oh, and thank you all for already starting this in the chat, but if you could please put your name and affiliation in the chat, please, that would be great.
Okay, now can you see it?
Yes.
Good. Close a couple things up here. Laser pointer, there we go. Okay, well, yeah, I guess we'll just get off and running with the statewide climate update then. So we'll start off with kind of where we're at for the water year thus far, as we usually do, in terms of temperature and precipitation. So we'll start with numbers through the end of February, since that's the most recent complete month, although clearly we're almost at the end of March somehow. And we'll look at where we're at in March in a little bit. But this is for the water year, so October 1st through the end of February. The map here is showing the average rank, the rank for the average temperature over this time period. So where you see the reds, it's been, among the warmest first 5 months of the water year. No blues on this particular map. So the main things I think that jump out here are how really, really warm it's been across the western tier of counties and down into southern Colorado over the first 5 months of the water year. The breakdown by month is over here on the right. So it was especially October and December were extremely warm. And then on the western slope, February was extremely warm. And we'll look at that in a minute in more detail. So for the first 5 months of the water year statewide, tied for the 21st warmest over that period. But again, most of western Colorado in the top 10 warmest at the, kind of way over on the western slope area. This is precipitation for the water year through February. And the main thing that jumps out here is how wet it still looks in southeastern Colorado. This is, as you may recall, almost entirely from that massive snowstorm in November. I guess snowstorm in most areas, rainstorm in some areas. And we'll take a little closer look at this area as we go, because it's a little bit of a challenge in terms of how we assess the drought conditions in that area right now. But you can see through the end of February, a lot of these areas still at the, in the top 10 wet, all from that one storm back in November. If we go over to western Colorado, we see some spots that are pretty dry. Some small pockets that are top 10 driest on record, and bigger areas that are at top 20 driest for the first 5 months of the water year. But when we look at the statewide numbers as a whole, it's actually very close to average, essentially right on the 1991 to 2020 average over that period. But as we know in Colorado, the averages are often, they often obscure the interesting stuff, because here, we have some big west-east splits, but you average those out to be near average. And again, breaking down the months, November was extremely wet. December and January were dry. February was a bit dry. statewide, but again, that depends a lot on where you're located. So here is just the month of February, and we'll look at those maps in a second. In the quadrant charts. So as a reminder here, the upper left is the drought quadrant, warm and dry. Upper right is warm and wet, cool and dry in the lower left, cool and wet in the lower right. February of 2025 here is just a little bit in the warm and dry quadrant. So warmer and a little bit drier than average there for that month. And then here's the first 5 months of the water year, October through February. Quite a bit warmer than average across the state, and essentially right on the average precipitation in the statewide average. But as always, we've already mentioned the averages obscuring the interesting stuff that we care about. Okay, so we'll take a look just at February now. Seems like a long time ago now, last month. But what we had in February was an interesting west to east split for temperature. Very, really jumps out on the map. So the reds here are areas that were warmer than average. The blues are colder than average. Alamosa had its warmest February on record, and the San Luis Valley was extremely warm in February. Western Colorado on the whole was very warm in February. And that contrasts in a big way with, say, go to the northeast corner of the state where it was 4 to 6 degrees colder than average in that area, while it was 8+ degrees above average in the San Luis Valley. And then this is precipitation from the month of February. Quite dry in the southeast and in the southwest. The northern and central mountains saw some recovery with some good snowstorms in February that brought the snowpack numbers back up closer to average in that part of the state, which was good to see. So just looking back at the February warmth, I know Peter talked about this during February, but now we got have the full month of data collected, and just a lot of warmth across southern and western Colorado in that month, and some kind of striking graphs that jump out here. So this graph shows the time series of the number of days that were 65 or above in the whole winter at Grand Junction. And so you can see most winters don't have any days above 65. Every once in a while you'll get a couple. This year we got 8. They were all in February. 5 of them were consecutive days early in the month. So that doubles the previous highest for an entire winter, which was 4 65-degree days. There were 8 this year at Grand Junction. This is Montrose, not quite as striking, but also a record breaker. There were 5 65-degree days. The previous highest had been 4. And then this is 60-degree days at Alamosa. Tends not to be quite as warm there as Grand Junction in the winter. But 8 60-degree days this winter at Alamosa. The previous high was 5, and the average is maybe a little less than 1. So just, again, some really remarkable warmth throughout the month. Allie from our office had done a blog post about the heat wave earlier in February that I think Peter talked about last month as well. So you can kind of check that out if you're interested in some more of those stats. Okay, so we are at the 25th of March. So where are we for March up to this point? This is precipitation across the state for the month of March through yesterday morning. I don't think there was precipitation anywhere in the state yesterday, so it probably would look the same once the data from yesterday is included. And the drought monitor categories are shown in the background there as well. So March has been pretty decent for the mountains in terms of precipitation and snowfall. I'm sure Brian will get into more details on the snowpack details. But you can see, a lot of the high elevation areas have had 3 or 4 inches or more of liquid over the month, which is not too bad, but not nearly enough to make up the deficits from earlier in the winter. Eastern Colorado has been pretty dry in March. There's a pocket that you can see like along I-70 that got a bunch of precipitation, mostly in the form of a blizzard last week. And then, or I guess maybe that was the weekend before, but then in the Arkansas Valley has been quite dry, and up the Northern Front Range up into northeastern Colorado has been dry for March. And here's what this looks like as the percent of average precipitation for March through yesterday. And we can see that, close to in the mountains, close to average, even a little bit above average in some spots for the month of March. But then you go like Northern Front Range, Larimer, Weld counties into the Denver area, very dry. South Park and the Sangre de Cristos, quite dry in March, and then the Arkansas Valley, quite dry as well, with some pockets of above average where they got some snow in the last couple of weeks. So these are the areas that are in brown here have been drying out quickly over the last few weeks, where there's been little to no precipitation. And then here's temperature comparison to average for, this is through the 23rd. Eastern Plains generally quite warm. Northeast corner much above average temperature. Southwest Colorado actually a little bit cooler than average. But yeah, most of the state has been warmer than average for the month of March, and that will continue through almost through the end of the month, as we'll look at. So probably these numbers will go up a bit when we reach the end of the month of March. Okay, so we'll take a look at where the drought conditions stand across the state. Probably many of you are familiar or heard about the big dust storms that have happened over the last couple of weeks. This is one of them. There was one about a week earlier over the Southern Plains, and then this one from last week from the 18th. This is a satellite imagery. Clearly the worst dust conditions and also wildfires have been in the Oklahoma, Texas area. You see this huge, massive amount of dust blowing from New Mexico into Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas. But you can also see, if you look closely, like eastern Colorado, before it gets covered up with clouds, there's a huge amount of dust blowing to the east there as well. So that affected Colorado in addition to our neighbors to the south and east. So here's what the U.S. Drought Monitor currently looks like. This is the map from last week over the continental United States. The worst drought conditions are generally in the southwestern United States, and then from far northern Colorado up into the high plains in Wyoming and Nebraska. So zooming in on Colorado, here is the current Drought Monitor map. We see western Colorado, those areas that were really warm and dry through the whole winter. Drought has expanded and intensified. So we have a few pockets of D2, the severe drought category, D1 covering most of the western tier of counties, and a little pocket of D3 extreme drought down in the San Juans, where the snow has really been lacking this winter. And then this pocket of drought that's been in place since last summer over the Northern Front Range, Larimer, Weld County areas, with some D3 still in northern Larimer and Weld. This is the area that's been really dry over the last month or so. So this is an area we're going to have to be looking at for expansion of drought degradations on the Drought Monitor. And then now we have D1 again in the southeast corner, which we'll take a closer look at in a second here. This is the change in the Drought Monitor over the last 4 weeks. So we can see, again, southeast Colorado, 2-class degradation over that time period. And then some of the southern mountain areas and up, towards Chaffee County, Park County, that have seen 1 to 2 category degradations over the last 4 weeks. And then also on the western slope. And then this is the change since the beginning of the water year. So this goes back to last October. Now we, as you may remember, back to last summer was pretty wet in the mountains and very dry along the Front Range. The early part of the water year flipped that. So and in western Colorado until now, right? It continues to be dry and the droughts worsen. So you see spots in like the San Juans and in Southwest Colorado that have seen 3 to 4 class degradation. They were wet going into the summer and are now at D2 and D3. The Front Range areas, like the foothills, erased the really bad drought from last summer with some good precipitation over the winter. So those areas have seen 3 to 4 category improvements, or I guess that's 2 to 3 category improvements since the beginning of the water year. And then some other spots that have, some mix of improvements and degradations over that time period. One other thing to point out is, especially in southwestern Colorado and really in the broader southwestern US, is, well, we talked about how warm it was through the winter, and that really got worse as you go southwest of Colorado into Arizona and New Mexico. So this is showing the evaporative demand, the eddy, over the last 3 months, and basically everywhere in this dark red brown color is where it's like record high or near record high evaporative demand for the winter. And so the drought stress, both from lack of precipitation but also just the fact that it's been sunny and warm and windy in this region, is setting the stage for the drought to continue to persist and get worse in that region. And we'll see that in the outlooks as well. So this catches southwest Colorado to some extent, but it's, if you're thinking about the whole Colorado River Basin, for example, this is not the sort of thing that you want to see over the course of the winter. Okay, so I've mentioned this a couple times. Let's zoom in a little bit on southeastern Colorado right now, because it's actually quite a mystery of how to characterize this in terms of drought. So this is through the end of February, and if we look, say, down here in far southern Baca County, we had areas that had their driest December through February, and at the same time had their wettest November through February. So again, this is the effect of that, how big that storm was back in November, to the 3, 4, 5 inches of precipitation, just kind of way more than you'd expect for the entire winter. And then they've had pretty much nothing since then. So it's sort of challenging to depict what is going on there on a single map like the US Drought Monitor. And we can also look at, for example, Holly in southeastern Colorado. This is the precipitation accumulation for the water year. The brown is the average, the green is this water year. So for the water year for a whole, Holly is about an inch above average in terms of precipitation. But they've had effectively nothing since that big storm in November, maybe a ½ inch of precipitation total over that time period. So again, is this area wet or dry? It depends a lot on what time scale you look at. What we've been looking at to try and be the tiebreaker, so to speak, in terms of drought in southeast Colorado is the soil moisture. Are the soils still retaining moisture from that November snowstorm is a big question. So this is shallow soil moisture on the left, deeper soil moisture on the right from the NASA WLDAS model that we use. And at least from this product, it suggests that the soil moisture is still hanging on in southeastern Colorado. It's not as good, not as plentiful as it was a couple of months ago, but still in the average to a little above average range, even though there's not been very much precipitation lately. But we would be very interested in any on the ground reports from folks down in that area in terms of what we're seeing. We know there's been dust storms lately, so that would suggest that the shallow soils are the shallow part of the soil is probably not all that moist, but maybe the deep soils are still retaining good moisture from the fall. So that's one of the things we've been puzzling over lately. Then if you look in like the Northern Front Range where it's been really dry lately, you can see the soil moisture, which is bad going back to last summer, continues to be not very good. And then this is the combination of groundwater and soil moisture and snowpack, that what they call the terrestrial water storage, basically all three pieces of the puzzle there. And this looks a lot more like recent precipitation maps, or like standardized precipitation maps, where the Larimer Weld County area, both from being dry last summer and the lack of recent precipitation, looks really bad here. Southeastern Colorado starts to look kind of dry. The mountain areas, a lot of areas are looking not so good. So we're still kind of trying to make sense of how to balance all of these different things in terms of the drought monitor categories. But this at least seems to reflect, well, the fact that there's not snow on the ground at the lower elevations, and there hasn't been much precipitation lately, and maybe some of those longer term soil moisture deficits. And I know Brian will talk more about snowpack, but it's sort of hard to talk about the drought right now without talking about snowpack. So I'll just show one thing and he can go into more details here, just of how, and I know we're going to talk more detail about the Rio Grande Basin later. So this is snowpack from the upper Rio Grande SNOTEL stations. Just a couple of things to point out, right? The average peak is in 9 days. And in that basin, it's about 6 inches short of that peak. So are we going to get 6 inches of liquid in the next 9 days? Definitely not. And actually probably will lose some snowpack, given how warm it is going to be over the next few days. The pink line down here is 2018. So it's not quite as bad as that, but it's sort of in the same conversation, which is not great, because I know those in southern and southwestern Colorado, or I'm sure, do not have good memories of how bad the drought was in 2018. So, but I know Brian will go into more detail in the snowpack numbers in a few minutes. Okay, so what does the outlook show going forward here? Maybe this is too much snow on Loveland here to be representative right now. Here is the 7-day precipitation forecast from NOAA. So going out into early next week. The Northeast Colorado, so we'll have the next 3-4 days are going to be dry, completely dry across the state until Friday into Saturday, when the storm system will move in. That looks like it might bring some precipitation to northern Colorado, northeastern Colorado. That would be quite welcome, but it's still a few days out, so we'll have to see. And also to the northern mountains, but southern part of the state looks pretty much dry over this period. And here's the where that is with the respect to average, the difference from average over the next 7 days. Check this out, that it's still like over the next 7 days, if there's no precipitation in the southern San Juans, right, that's a over an inch of a deficit. We already saw that we're about 6 inches low in that area. We're going to lose some, in terms of snowpack, at least, we're going to lose some snowpack probably to melting. We're not going to gain any more from precipitation. So the situation there in like the San Juan Mountains and in Southwest Colorado is not going to be getting better over the next week. Maybe some help up in the northeastern plains. We'll see. Here's just the same maps, but broken down by day. So again, Saturday looks like Friday night through Saturday, if there's going to be precipitation in along the Front Range and northeastern plains, that's when it is going to be in this over the next week. But you can see Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, very warm and dry. This is temperature at Denver from the Weather Forecast Ensemble. Tomorrow and definitely Thursday will be in the conversation of record high temperatures. This is probably underestimating what the actual high is. It might get to 80 on Thursday. Could even get close to 80 tomorrow in the Denver area. Even warmer in some spots. So very, very warm for late March. Then we'll cool down a bit over through the weekend and into early next week, and then a little uncertain beyond that, but looks like it may warm back up, but we'll see on that. That seems to be what the CPC outlook is pointing towards, is warming back up into early April. So this is the 8 to 14 day outlook, valid for the first week of April. Very warm across the southern tier of states, but it's going to get active again during this time period along the West Coast. That maybe gives us a little hope that some of that moisture will make its way across the Great Basin over into Colorado here. You can see a slight tilt towards above average precipitation in northwest Colorado there, but staying dry to the south over that period as well. And here's trying to combine those two with the weather forecast model ensemble. So this is the percent of the 50 weather forecast models that are below average over the next 15 days for precipitation, near average in the middle, above average on the right. So again, we're seeing some of this north-south issue that we've seen through the winter. Some hope maybe for some drought relief, or at least not getting worse over northern Colorado. There's fairly high confidence of the pattern getting more active. Again, this is mostly in the period beyond 7 days. That first week of April getting more active, but you can see southeastern Colorado, not much hope for relief there, and kind of a mix of possibilities in the southwest, but not really any, no drought busting storms in the outlook for southern Colorado anytime soon. And then I think it's also worth remembering that April is a really important month for precipitation, again, especially in northern Colorado and along the Front Range. So for like the lower elevations of northwestern Colorado, April is the wettest month of the year on average. And then like some of the foothills and mountains along the Front Range, it's some places it is the wettest, or it's second to May in terms of the precipitation. So it's a really important month. And Peter had a blog post on our blog that was kind of cool to about how we define the seasons. So take a look at that, and kind of one of the conclusions, right, is that spring is a really important season for precipitation and water supply. And so, and especially in the northern part of the state, it's when we expect to get quite a bit of precipitation, and we really need it during that time. So what does the outlook show then, looking out further? So maybe some good-ish news is that La Nina is basically over. We'll be back in and so neutral conditions, so neither El Nino or La Nina going forward. So that's expected to persist through the summer, and then beyond that, it's very uncertain. So a little too early to look out, to be too concerned about what happens out there. But the La Nina is ending, which is, in general, is probably good news in some sense. So as a reminder, like if we look at spring in the upper right here, if you see red colors on this map, it means El Nino is wetter. If you see blue colors, it means La Nina is better. We've been in La Nina through the winter, and it's kind of still holding on to some extent, but now going away. So La Nina is not good to have during the spring and the summer, because it tends to be dry. So I guess that's one little bit of good news, is that is going away. Neutral conditions, a little bit, not as distinct in terms of what we expect in the spring and the summer. But then if we look at the NOAA outlooks, which take into account a lot more information than just El Nino, La Nina, this is the outlook for the month of April. This is for temperature. I put the little pin at Alamosa there so you can see the little pie charts that show the chances of being above normal, near normal, or below normal at Alamosa, for example. So a fairly strong tilt towards a warmer than average April. Again, kind of consistent with La Nina still sticking around, but waning. And then a pretty strong tilt towards drier than average April across most of the state. And then if we look out to the 3-month outlook, the April, May, June outlook, more of the same generally. The southern tier of states tilted towards warmer than average, with the higher confidence the farther south you go. So again, southern Colorado down into the southwestern US, looking like a high confidence for warm warmer than average April, May, June, and dry across the western US. That's a pretty high confidence forecast for drier than average over April, May, June. So that is not the kind of outlook that we like to see at this point either. And then, I think Kevin's going to talk about flooding, which, maybe it's the wildfires that we need to be more concerned about at this point. If you look at these USDA wildfire outlooks for April and May, they just show nothing on the map for Colorado, like near average fire potential. But once you get to June, then Southwest Colorado and much of the southwestern US starts to show up as above normal wildfire potential. So these get updated again on the first of the month. So we'll see what they look like then. And I know we usually maybe we have a wildfire outlook teed up for this meeting in April or May. I think we often do that. Okay, so some takeaways. The water year through February has generally started warm and dry. Very warm and dry if we didn't have that massive snowstorm in November. That's making the numbers look pretty decent still, and I think some of that moisture is still around. But other than that storm, it's been very warm and dry across the state. It was among the warmest and driest winters on record in western Colorado. And then in eastern Colorado, March has been dry and windy thus far. The mountains have seen decent snow, but not enough to make up the huge deficits that built up earlier in the winter. And so as a result of all of this, the drought conditions have worsened in the southwestern part of the state. They're starting to expand in the eastern part of the state with recent dryness. So little bits of good news are that La Nina is waning and on its way out. And I didn't show this, but the early outlooks for the summer do point towards maybe an active monsoon in the southwestern US, but it's probably a little too early to hang our hats on that. That'll be something to keep an eye on. But I think the news is probably tilted towards the bad side in terms of drought. The current conditions combined with what those outlooks for spring and early summer look like, I think raised some pretty serious concerns about drought in the southern part of the state, which is already in not great shape, and the potential is there for that to continue to get worse as the spring and early summer goes along, because the outlooks do not favor recovery in that region, and there's already quite a bit of dryness and low snowpack, as we'll hear from Brian. So there's contact info and places to get in touch with us, and happy to take any questions if there are any, and if there's a minute or two.
Russ, this is Kevin. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Can you talk a little bit more about the active monsoon you brought up there at the end?
Yeah,
How you think
so
that
like
might impact things?
Yeah, so if you look at the CPC outlooks, out through like June, July, August, or July, August, September, they show some green blob over like Arizona, New Mexico, right? And that's really what their point, that would be the signal of a more active monsoon. It doesn't actually show any of that creeping up into Colorado, but usually if Arizona, New Mexico's wet, then Western Colorado will at least catch some of that. So I mean, I think it's way too early to be very confident about any of that. But as you know, it would be a bad sequence of events to be really dry through the spring and summer, have a bunch of fires, and then have an active monsoon season. So I wouldn't like, people shouldn't be like freaking out about that possibility or anything at this point, because that's still several months out into the future. But it's at least you could kind of connect the dots that at least a scenario like that has some possibility. This is my very hand wavy answer, but hopefully that helps a bit, because I'm guessing that's what you're sort of worried about as well.
All right. Thanks, Russ. Do you think that southeastern Colorado is wet or dry?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know if there's anybody on from that part of the state. We do, so just one, like we do have, so we have those soil moisture sensors that we got put in a couple of years ago, sponsored by the Department of Ag, and we can, part of the challenge is we don't have a long record to compare that to, and there's going to be, as many folks on the call probably know, there's going to be a bunch more soil moisture sensors getting put in around the state coming up. So it'll allow for some better monitoring of that. But at least from what we can tell from, say, our soil moisture sensor in Walsh, it looks like the deeper soil moisture is hanging on. But it's something we don't have a ton of data on, and would love any on the ground reports if anyone has them. And if there is somebody, we can do that in the water provider piece, or feel free to send me a chat or whatever if there's anybody down in the Arkansas Valley or in that area, in terms of how the ag conditions are looking and what the soils are looking like.
Yeah, if there's anyone from the Arkansas Valley area, feel free to respond in the chat. Oh yeah, Jerry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm down in the Baca County area, and just like what you were saying, the top is a little bit dry, but there is a lot of really good submoisture. About probably it's going deeper, but it's about 3 inches down right now, and it's really good submoisture, but the top is dry.
That's super helpful. Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry.
Did you all get a lot of blowing dust last week, or was that to your north?
We had some, but luckily that storm brought in it rained pretty solid for 3/4 of the day before it started to snow. So we had over 1/2 an inch of moisture in the area, and that helped with the blowing dust. Now, when you go north, like towards Kiowa County, Prowers County, they didn't have the rain, so they had the dust pretty bad.
That's what it kind of looked like from the maps too. So yeah, no, that's super helpful. Good to know. Thanks.
Hey, Russ,
Yes.
hear me?
Sorry,
This is Ryan Dalton with Pueblo Water.
Oh, hey, Ryan.
I can't speak to soil moisture because I don't know that for certain, but I can tell you that last week we got pretty much zero moisture and a ton of dust blowing through. I live a little ways east of town, and it was through town, west of town, east of town. It was blowing dust everywhere.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, I see in the chat that the air was chunky in Pueblo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that sounds not fun.
All right, thanks all for contributing. And thank you, Russ, for the great presentation. Appreciate the good and the bad news. So I will hand it off now to Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Russ, for a great presentation. Yeah, not looking the most promising at this point. Let me share my screen. I've got a bunch of screens. All right, let's try this. Let's see if this works. And then,
Okay, yeah, we can see your slides. Yep.
and are you seeing the presenter view or are you seeing the main view?
The main view. Like I
Okay.
can't see any notes or anything.
Okay, perfect.
Cool.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Emily. All right. Again, good morning, everybody. We'll start diving right into snowpack. As Russ said, we're really kind of at that point in the year where snowpack is about ready to probably hit its peak. Just so you're all are aware, the peak snowpack typically happens in early April in the southwest portion of the state, southern and southwestern, and then in the northern part of the state, particularly the Front Range of Colorado, and into the Park Range, the North Platte, the upper end of the Little Snake. And Yampa, that typically peaks with snowpack in late April, say about the 18th through the 24th, thereabout. Of course, it can be much later. Every year is different a little bit, but usually that's where things settle out, kind of like Russ mentioned. So I'm going to put one graphic up here highlighting snowpack across the entire state. And what I've done here is I'm showing 2024 as the black line, and then I put in 2021 to compare a similar year to this year. 2021 is relatively recent in most of our minds. And then 2024 is the most recent. We all know what happened last year. And then threw in, unfortunately, 2012, just to kind of show you that we are better than where we were at this point in 2012. In 2012, snowpack had already peaked out in the early part of March, and then really started to dive off in a full-on spring melt. But we're not seeing that at this point this year across the entire state. The little kind of highlight here, what we can do with this tool is simply hover over certain dates, a certain date, and then you can see what the amount of actual snow water, the amount of water in the snowpack is for these different years. So you can see the maximum was in, well, we don't know which year that was. Forgive me, that's not here, but it was 21.5 inches of snow water equivalent. This year, as of yesterday morning, when I put this presentation together, we were looking at 13.5 inches of snow water. And then in 2021, we were looking at 14 inches. And then in 2012, we were looking at 11.4. So snowpack, as of yesterday morning, was 93% of median across the entire state. That is fortunately up from March 1. So we were looking at an improvement of about 140%. As Russ said, this time of year, it is a pivotal moment because we are typically getting a little bit more precip. We are in a slight lull if you're looking at this green line here, where there's a slight downturn. Things kind of dry out a little bit, but usually on average, we actually start to get a little bit wetter here if we're looking at the day-to-day and what we see across the entire state of Colorado. So hopefully we will see some of those storms that Russ is talking about here in a week or two. And we'll see a improvement. Okay, looking at the map of Colorado for snowpack as of yesterday morning, the northern half of the state is really doing pretty good. Excuse me one second. Sorry, I'm dealing with just a little bit of congestion and it comes to get me every once in a while. So hopefully I don't have to do that too much more. Northern half of the state is looking pretty good. The upper Colorado is still 102% of normal snowpack. The South Platte is 103% of normal. But when you get further south, that is where the snowpack is lower, kind of like Russ was mentioning. So I thought I would highlight a number of the basins around the state. I'm going to show one of the basins that's near normal. That's going to be the Colorado headwaters, and then we'll dive into each one of the basins in the south and kind of show what that snowpack has been doing in each one of those basins. So in the Colorado headwaters, we're looking at 102% of normal snowpack, really pretty good. We're actually quite close to where we were last year at this point and very close to 2022 at this point. Not exactly sure what's going to happen with the future accumulations, as appreciate the fact that Russ already mentioned all that. We probably will continue to see some increases, and you can see here much of the headwaters of Colorado does peak out towards the earlier part of April. When you combine all of the sites together, there are high elevation sites and there are low elevation sites, and those low elevation sites tend to actually start to melt out, whereas the high elevation don't, and you're seeing a blend of that here. So it can be a little bit confusing, but it is kind of nice to know that there is general trends across the entire basin, even though the higher elevation sites are holding on. So Colorado headwaters is doing pretty good. Now, diving into those other basins in the state, the Rio Grande, as I recall, is doing the worst for snowpack in the state. Again, shown by the black line here. 2024 is the orange line. And then I decided to throw 2006 and 2012 in there just to kind of give a comparison. I think 2012 and also 2002 kind of sit in a number of our minds. as to how things played out that year. And then hopefully we will see some improvements for snowpack. That's why I put the 2006 in here, but hard to tell. We'll have to see. We are relatively close to 2012 in terms of where snowpack is right now, but we also have to remember that the snowpack in 2012 was actually higher, but did start to melt out earlier. So that's something I'm going to draw a comparison to pretty much towards the end of the presentation here is the snow to flow graphs is what we call them, which shows what the snowpack was for a given year and what the flow was for that same year. So we can kind of anticipate perhaps what we may wind up seeing for runoff. Oh, excuse me, going back to the Rio Grande here, snowpack is 71% of normal in the upper Rio Grande Basin as of yesterday morning. Okay, moving a little further to the east on the far side of the divide, looking at the Arkansas River Basin, snowpack is at 74% of normal. Again, showing 2024, 2016, and 2015. I couldn't find too many similar years for this particular one, but I also wanted to show kind of the idea that the snowpack can kind of stabilize as well, or I shouldn't say stabilize, the snowpack can kind of maintain itself if the proper conditions present themselves. On the other hand, we can see more snow or it could go down. So something to keep an eye out for. And then finally, the combined San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, San Juan Basin is currently at 75% of normal, percent of median snowpack as of, oh, I actually updated this one this morning. So some of these downturns I think are real. We did our data edits yesterday. And so that's why we might see a little downturn here. Sometimes the data might have some hiccups in it, which could present that. But we have seen some downward trends. I don't think the snowpack is isothermal at this point anywhere across the state. Well, let me say this. The heart of the snowpacks across these major basins are probably not quite isothermal at this point. And forgive me, let me explain. Isothermal means that the snowpack is all one temperature. When the snowpack is all one temperature, that means it has a very high likelihood of melting. You get 2 or 3 warm days, warm nights, and that snowpack will legitimately start to run off. We have our staff headed to the field as we speak, doing our manual surveys in the South Platte Basin, as well as our cooperators across the state headed out, and they will get an idea of if the snowpack is isothermal. I haven't had a chance to look at our snowpack temperature sensors to see if the heart of the snowpack is isothermal. Usually at this point, it's not quite as isothermal. Further south in the basin or further south in the state, there's a higher likelihood that it could be, whereas in the northern half of the state with 100% of normal snowpack, we're probably not seeing isothermal. It's pretty rare to see at this point. Now, I know there have been a number of sites in the southern half of the state, those lower elevation sites that have seen legitimate melt. Some of those sites are typically not very deep snowpack sites, but they are showing decreases in snowpack that is actually melt, and the snowpack there is isothermal. But those are at the lower elevations. Moreover, those are in some of those basins, such as the Rio Grande, where snowpack is low. The snowpack does not have as much cold content there and is more susceptible to melt off. But at this point, you could still see that the Rio Grande graph that I was showing 2 slides ago is still showing a large uptrend. If it really was becoming isothermal, we would start to see this black line really kind of level off, kind of. So I might be able to point to that here again in some of those last slides. All right. I showed, or excuse me, I thought I would quickly highlight what accumulation we've seen in March. And Russ kind of showed this in a number of his other graphics. But again, in the northern half of the state, we are seeing decent precipitation, thankfully. Snowpack does continue to accumulate a little bit better than normal, at least here throughout March. However, in the southern half of the state, things are not receiving as much precipitation. Excuse me, I got that slide out of order there. Okay, so now looking at precipitation, looking at the time series graph across the statewide, where precipitation is 95% of normal. Now we've got to remember that this is year-to-date precipitation, right? We're not just looking at kind of monthly precipitation and what that's been. But this graphic, the year-to-date statewide precipitation shows precipitation is near normal, but I would not say it's very reflective of what's truly going on. Being statewide and year to date, we need to look at things on a more higher resolution scale. So as I mentioned, statewide precipitation, 95% of median as of yesterday morning. Again, northern half of the state looking okay. The Arkansas is looking okay, primarily driven by what's going on in the upper portion of the Arkansas River Basin. You can see that these lower basin sites are registering some lower values, but the upper basin is really what's helping drive the higher number there, that 98% of normal. And then looking to the San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, San Juan, and Rio Grande basins, again, precipitation has been pretty low there for the last few months. So with this, I kind of wanted to highlight again, just simply that the Arkansas River Basin is doing so well, mainly because of the upper basin. Fortunately, we are seeing some of these minor basins are showing decent snowpack, or I should say above normal snowpack, slightly, albeit, 116% of number normal, 114% of normal. Sorry, that's 118. It's kind of a small number to read there in the headwaters of the Colorado. I think that may be the headwaters, forgive me. But as you go further south, snowpack is looking a lot worse. And sorry, I did switch back to snowpack here to be very clear, but snowpack is doing relatively good in the center of the state, which actually helps out a number of those basins that originate from the central portion of the state. Okay, and then going back to precipitation here. The combined San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, San Juan is 81% of normal. But over the last month, it looks okay, but it's not doing so well. I'll have to reconcile that against the map that we showed. Sometimes, of course, comparing it to the green line here, this is where the green line being average, forgive me, and then black line being this year so far. Looking at the South Platte River Basin, wanted to show one of the basins in the north doing relatively well, 100% of median, and tracking there really close. The black line is right on the median line, and then 2024 showing in the orange line. Okay, I actually was able to throw these slides in real quick when Russ mentioned on the ground measurements of soil moisture. I threw these in really quickly. Initially, I didn't want to put these in there because sometimes the signatures are a bit confusing. And what I'm alluding to is, you have this one site or kind of one basin. It's really one site that's showing dry conditions at the 8-inch soil moisture. And then we're seeing a few of the basins on the east side of the Front Range also showing below normal soil moisture at the 8-inch sensor. And we believe that to be true. It is the 8-inch sensor. There's a number of reasons that could be happening. But in general, as you look across the entire map here, you see largely better conditions at a number of the sites. As Russ mentioned, the measurements that we have here are not very robust. So you can see the individual points and the colors that they have. About half of those locations are not even showing up with data. And you can see the X or the line, which simply means that we don't have enough data there. So I actually reduced the requirement for the amount of years, the period of record, to be at least 10 years to then provide data to show these colors. And so like I was mentioning, the network is not that robust. All of our sites are, of course, in the mountains and measuring that information. They're not in the plains and the low elevation sites, but it still gives us an idea of what's going on. And I think if we look at this graph as a whole, or excuse me, this map as a whole, we see that things are relatively normal. As Russ kind of mentioned, soil moisture does seem to be okay. We are in the middle of winter where you don't typically see soil moisture change very much. Soils can be frozen, and even if they're not frozen, they're usually pretty stagnant because we're not seeing any of that snowpack melt into the soil, and a lot of that moisture doesn't actually run out. It just kind of stays in the soil, particularly if it is frozen. Forgive this reservoir text here. We'll get to that here in a little bit. And then I also wanted to show the 20-inch sensor, which can be typically is a little bit more stable for soil moisture, again, because it is deeper and can be a little bit more of a long-term indication of what soil moisture is showing. Again, here we are seeing a bit more consistent readings, not quite so many reds, and here in the north, we are showing some drier conditions, probably on the heels of last year. Hopefully that snowpack this year will help charge those soils and soil moisture being near to above normal in the southern half of the state for that 20-inch sensor. So trying to make sense of a not very robust period of record or sensor network, but still some information that we can glean from that soil moisture. There are actual on the ground measurements that do seem to largely correlate with the models that Russ was showing. Okay, now we're going to get into reservoirs here. Reservoirs across the state are actually doing relatively well, 94% of median, better in the Rio Grande and upper end of the Arkansas, and then near normal across the northern portion of the state. However, unfortunately, the combined San Miguel de Loras, San Dimas, San Juan is only at 81% of median as of the beginning of March. We will be collecting that data for the beginning of April here in just the next the beginning of next week, and we will have that report out hopefully by the beginning of, what is that, the 7th, I think, of April. So hopefully you can find that, all that data you need there for reservoirs on April 7th. Another way here of looking at reservoir storage as of the beginning of March, we also call it the end of February, where reservoirs across the state were relatively varied. I wanted to draw attention to the two main, actually, I hope this, let me see if I can't minimize this. There we go. The statewide number or line trace is the orange line here. And what we're looking at is reservoir storage as a percent of median, tracking back all the way to April of 95. So here you can see right here, we're at 94% of median statewide. And then I also wanted to draw attention to the two basins that I pointed out earlier. We're not doing so great for reservoir storage. Forgive me, the one basin, which is the San Miguel de Loras, San Dimas, San Juan, which is the gray line. You can see that it's below. And then I also wanted to highlight the basin that's doing the best in the state for reservoir storage, and that is the upper Rio Grande. Here you see that it has come up over the course of, I think that was late last year, and then over the course of this winter, it's largely stayed the same with a slight decline. Just wanted to show you the two extremes of what's going on in the state. All of these products are available to everybody. You can access them on our web pages, and you can customize these tools by simply clicking here. So if you want to turn on the South Platte Basin and look at what that reservoir storage has done over since 95, you just click on this right here and it'll show up on there. So, all right, hopping into streamflow forecasts. This is the forecast that were produced on March 1. So at the beginning of this month, so they are a little bit dated. We will, of course, take the information on April 1, generate those forecasts, and they should start being populated into our database about the 3rd or 4th working day of the month. So this week it winds up being, I think, the 3rd or 4th. You should see those in the interactive map. They will not be in our water supply outlook report, as that's not published for another few working days, but you should be able to find those forecasts in the interactive map if you access them. So as of March 1st, streamflow forecasts looked relatively normal in the north and western portions of the state, but as you progress, northern and eastern portions of the state, but as you progress southwesterly, the reservoir or streamflow forecasts start to dive off. And the upper end of the Gunnison forecasts look relatively well, but as Russ was pointing out, when you get further to the west in Colorado, things really do start to dry out a bit and then get kind of a bit more extreme in the combined San Miguel de Loras, San Dimas, San Juan basins. So hopefully we will see a little bit more snow accumulation, which will help boost some of these numbers, particularly in the southwest portion of the state. But right now, based on the information that we have and near normal snowpack and precipitation accumulation, that's what these forecasts are based on. This is what we would anticipate seeing as of March 1st data, what we would see in terms of runoff. this summer and spring. Sorry, this graphic here on the right is a little bit on the small side. This is the South Platte. These are all of the forecasts on the South Platte. And then on the left is the San Miguel, Dolores, San Ynez, San Juan basins. I just, again, wanted to kind of show the two extremes of conditions in the state. I'll be quick to point out that the gray line is normal, right? So this is 100% of normal runoff, volumetric runoff. And these ranges here are actually showing what the anticipated runoff is based on the conditions that we saw on March 1. So I'll look at right here on the top forecast, the Dolores River near Dolores, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. Right now, or based on March 1st data, we would expect most likely to see 140,000 acre feet flow through that gauge. Now, if we do have a wetter spring, whether it be rain or snowpack, then you might want to use this upper end of the scale to anticipate runoff. Conversely, if we do wind up being drier, then you might want to consider some portion down in here. So we want to give a range of forecasts because more than likely, the most probabilistic outcome, that single outcome will more than likely not happen. But it should be somewhere within this range based on the data that we had on March 1st. Okay, earlier in the presentation, I was referring to the snow to flow plots or graphs that we're looking at right here. I only wanted to show the two basins in the state, or I shouldn't say two basins. I only wanted to show the areas in the state where snowpack is currently relatively low. I know this graph is a bit on the busy side, but let me help explain it here. The light green line is median snowpack for all of the sites that are used for the particular basin. So here we're looking at the Rio Grande with the Del Norte stream gauge, right? And so the grayscale here is the runoff, and then the dotted lines in the grayscale is the stream flow observed at the Del Norte stream gauge. And then the kind of rainbow background, and then the solid lines are snowpack for previous years. And what we have here, the black line is 2025 this year, and the black dotted line is the stream flow for this year. Unfortunately, it seems like maybe this gauge hasn't, we just haven't quite gotten that data yet, but it's not too big a deal for 2025. The point is to highlight what's happened in previous years and where snowpack is at this point in the year. So I put in 2013 and 2012 because where those lines, or where 2025 is right now, is relatively close to 2013 and 2012. Again, here's that median value, and here's the median runoff observed at that stream gauge. Well, if we take 2013 and 2012 and plot those snowpacks, which are close to this year, to where the runoffs occurred for those years, you can actually see that the median runoff is higher than what we saw in both 2013 and 2012, right? Not too surprising because we saw the snowpack be lower than the snowpack median there. We would expect that general kind of behavior. So one thing to point out here is that in 2012, it was about this point where snowpack started to melt in the Rio Grande above Del Norte. And you can see through the slightly darker dotted green line that stream flow was starting to come up at that point. And but did wind up declining significantly earlier than the median stream flow runoff. In 2013, we did wind up seeing a little bit of extra snow later on in the year, not too late by any means. Snowpack still melted out a bit earlier than median. So we did see that the hydrograph did tend to kind of go a little bit longer, but it still wound up tailing off and subsiding well before the median typical runoff occurs. So that's the kind of things that I'm trying to show here in these next few plots. Exact same plots. I tried to make it a little bit more evident here. This is again, the Rio Grande at Del Norte. And I wanted to show 2018, 2020, and 1994. And I simply wanted to do that to kind of show the different potential outcomes that we could see. Again, years that were relatively close to where we are right now. In 1994, we saw that we wound up getting a good bit more snow, which wound up being near normal snowpack. And then you can see again with that corresponding dotted orange line that the runoff actually wound up being relatively normal or close to normal. And then kind of toning it back, 2000 snowpack was below median. And then the runoff, the entire volumetric runoff was also below median when you compare it to that dotted green line. And then looking at the slightly more extreme case, 2018, again, it's a little bit harder to catch in here, but you can see that runoff too tailed off much earlier than even 2000. Okay, now looking at the San Juan River near Caracas, same kind of thing. Where's the snowpack now? What years does it compare most closely to? I selected 2018 and 2000 here. Here's the median runoff. And you can see that the runoff that occurred from those two similar years to this one was a good bit lower than what we see in a median year. And then again, just trying to, with the same stream gauge, Caracas, San Juan River, trying to look at the three kind of scenarios based on where snowpack is right now. If we were to continue to get more snow, this darker green, or is that green or blue? I can't even make that out. Darker green snowpack did wind up collecting a little bit more even later in the year. Probably not going to happen this year, but that runoff, I think it is this dark blue line, did wind up being a good bit better. And then when we compare 1990 and 1981, same thing, you can see that the stream flows were lower. So just trying to reference what years we've seen and where it's close to for this year. So I'll go through this very quickly. Statewide snowpack is currently at 93% of normal, up a little bit from, excuse me, I think I highlighted this wrong. So snowpack, as of right now, is 93% of normal. And yes, I did get this right. It was 88% of normal on March 1. So we're up a little bit across the entire state. But as I pointed out, things are quite different across the state. Better in the northern half of the state and North and South Platte, and then not looking so great in the southern half of the state. Year-to-date precipitation looks relatively good at 95% of median, but that's really riding on the heels of what happened earlier in the year. So I would tend to want to look at some of the more recent time frames. Don't look at the entire year, but look at last month or the last few months. Reservoir storage, fortunately, is 94% of normal or median. 80% of median in the San Miguel de Loras Animas and San Juan basins, but better in the Rio Grande and Arkansas at this point. We'll have to see how things play out in the months when we actually wind up seeing that runoff. And then finally, the stream flow forecasts are below normal in the southwestern portion of the state, including the Gunnison and the Rio Grande, better in the northern and eastern portions of the state. I would guess that in the southern half of the state, come April 1, we're going to be looking at lower stream flow forecast in the Arkansas, Rio Grande, Gunnison, and combined San Miguel de Loras Animas San Juan basins. So that is my update. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Any questions for Brian? Oh, yes, there's a question in the chat. Could we get a link where the satellite images of the dust storms are? Oh, that might be for Russ.
Yes, will do.
All right, any other questions for Brian or Russ at this point? All right, well, hearing none, if you do have questions, just put them in the chat. And thank you again, Brian, for your presentation. It's good to see that reservoir storage is looking pretty good in some of the southern basins. It's a bit of good news. And now I will turn it over to Kevin Hauk, who will give us a flood outlook for this spring 2025.
Right. Thank you, Emily. I assume you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. I don't have any slides like everybody else, so I'm just going to sit here and talk. and I appreciate the opportunity to address the flood threat as people are often wondering about every year when this time comes around. My name is Kevin Hauk. I'm the Chief of Watershed and Flood Protection at the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And this is always an interesting time of year in my world. We're looking at not only water supplies and water resources, but also natural hazards as well. So I guess getting up and talking at this point in the meeting following the past two speakers is a little like being invited onto stage to tell a joke and when everybody already knows the punchline. I think you've already heard what the current situation looks like. You've seen the forecasts from Russ, and so you probably already know what I'm going to say, but I'll just share with you a little bit of what goes into my outlooks for flooding when we reach this time each year. There's a number of factors that we look at, but like climate and some of the other things that you've heard today, we don't deal in absolutes. We deal with probabilities, and so it's hard or just about impossible to say, is it going to flood this year or is it not going to flood this year? All that we can look at is, do we have a higher than normal likelihood or a more suppressed set of chances? And I think I'll give my own punchline away and tell you, I think my outlook for the flood season is that it's probably going to be a little bit suppressed this year for a number of reasons. And let me go into what those are. We have a number of different types of flooding, ranging from snowmelt flooding, general spring rainstorms, which typically peak probably around Memorial Day or so. We have more isolated convective type flooding that tends to peak right around August 1st and can be a little bit more localized in nature. We may have more tropically induced flooding that can creep up in September. That's a little more rare, but as we saw in 2013, it can be very impactful when it does happen. And then in recent years, one of our biggest threats of flooding is the areas downstream of wildfires after a large wildfire occurs. And Russ mentioned that briefly during his talk. I'll try to address some of these one by one. As far as snowpack, you've seen from the last two presenters, it's okay at best this year and not good at all at worst. Northern parts of the mountains, I've heard many people describe it as good this year. I'm not sure good is the word that I would use. I would say it's okay. Definitely not bad, but we're right around 100% right now. But given the seasonal and monthly forecasts that we're looking at, I expect those are going to go down before the end of the accumulation season. Looking down south, the snowpack is bad and getting quickly worse, and I think is also going to be impacted by those monthly forecasts, maybe even more so down in those areas. So when we look at snowmelt runoff flooding, we look at two things. How much snow is on the ground, and is there a trigger event that makes it come off really fast? Usually that trigger event is a sustained multi-day warm-up, or it can be a rain on snow type event. It's always hard to predict those trigger events weeks in advance, but I think we can all agree from what we've seen from the past couple presenters that the snowpack is not looking really robust this year. So I think that's going to lead to some suppressed chances for snowmelt flooding. As far as general rainstorm in the spring and the convective storms that we see in late July and early August, those are just impossible to predict this far out. One thing we can look at are some of the climate indicators, and Russ did show that we are emerging from a La Nina type event. and moving into what is more likely to be a neutral event. He also showed the graphs that showed that especially for spring, summer, and fall, the El Nino type regime tends to result in more rainfall. And I typically look at El Nino summers as having a more enhanced risk of flooding, especially in eastern Colorado. Since we're going to be in more of a neutral type regime, or at least that's the most likely outcome anyway, I take that to mean it's probably just an average risk of flooding as we head into the spring and summer, resulting from rainfall. I haven't seen any tropical forecasts for this hurricane season. Again, that can impact us occasionally moving into September when we can get hurricane remnants, or at the very least some tropically induced storms like we saw in 2013. These are pretty rare, and again, I think at this point of the year it's going to be hard to predict that this far out. I'll probably talk mostly about wildfires right now because I think that's the area that I'm most concerned about. And Russ said I would probably talk about this, and he's right. It's been a few years now since we've had seasons with large scale wildfires. The last one was 2020, which was very unusual. You may all recall that most of the wildfires broke out in October that year, or maybe late September, whereas typically we see the peak of our wildfire season in the month of June. I think it was in Russ's presentation, he did show the wildfire forecast for June that did show an elevated risk of fires down in Southwest Colorado. And I very much agree with that. I'm neither a wildfire forecaster nor a climate forecaster, but I've worked with these for enough years. I kind of know what to look for. And I think that the risk of wildfire is going to be much elevated this summer, especially with the forecasts, seasonal forecasts that we're looking at. The one saving grace we have in the area of the state with lower snow right now is that these are the same areas that had very good late summer and fall seasons for rainfall. So the soil moisture in these areas were really good going into the snow season. And I think that is going to be one thing that may mitigate that wildfire risk as we head into runoff season. If that had been not the case and we had dry soil moisture going into the winter, I would see big flashing red lights in that part of the state right now. But fortunately, we do have that working in our favor. But you did see the seasonal forecasts from Russ, both for the month of April and also for several 3-month periods as well. And it's an unusually confident forecast to me. It's not 100% by any means, but it seems like it has higher probabilities of being warmer and drier than I'm used to seeing for these kind of seasonal forecasts. So I think that's something that's going to be something that we have to watch closely. So to summarize with the wildfires, it's been long enough now from past seasons that we've generally removed our post-wildfire flooding watches for most of the past burn scars. All of them from 2018, which was a particularly bad summer as well. The one that we're probably continuing to watch a little bit will be the Cameron Peak wildfire, which for some reason just continues to hang on and on. We had more problems there last year, but it does get better every year. And hopefully we'll continue to see improvements this year. The big question is going to be, are we going to have new wildfires and burn scars to face? Of course, we don't know that yet, but it's something that we're going to have to watch closely. Just remember, if we do have any large wildfires, especially ones that burn very heavy, we can see flooding and debris flow risks that are elevated for anywhere from 3 to 5 years following that. So it's going to be something that we're going to have to watch closely. Emily, I think that's about all that I want to say. I'm happy to take any questions or discussion if anybody would like to have any.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Any questions for Kevin or comments, concerns? Right. Well, hearing none, just want to thank you, Kevin, for providing your outlook as you do at our March meeting every year. So, although it's not amazing news, we appreciate your insights. And so now for our final several minutes, I saw that Pat McDermott joined us. So welcome, Pat. I know that you were busy today, so we appreciate you having or coming to our meeting today. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, and we know that you're located in the Rio Grande Basin, so if you wanted to just give the group some local updates on water supply conditions at the moment, that would be super helpful. So welcome again.
Well, and Emily, thank you. It's a pleasure, my pleasure to join you all this morning. It's good to hear Kevin again, and he doesn't have great news for us. We too here at the Division of Water Resources are very fearful of the potential for wildfire in the Rio Grande Basin this year. We've been able to dodge it. I'm going to knock on wood. Successfully for a few years now, but I'm very concerned about how things end up, because we all see that the forecast calls for above normal temperatures and drier conditions than normal, probably through June. So let me give you a report, Emily, on what we've seen lately. Let's start with temperature. Greetings from Alamosa, Arizona, where it's probably 60 degrees out there right now. And I look back at what the temperature has been here in Alamosa. In October, we were 5 degrees above normal. In December, we were 7 degrees above normal. February, just a month ago, almost 10 degrees above normal. 10 degrees above normal. It's a little alarming. Now this month here in March, it's near normal, but it looks like we're in a pattern of every other month. You get highly variable high temperatures. And so anyway, let me kick over to the current snowpack. And here in our basin, overall in the upper Rio Grande Basin, we're 72% of normal, but I would report that it seems our snowpack is better on the northern end of the San Luis Valley. So you get up towards Cochito Pass, you get over towards Slumgolian Pass, Beartown, where we're seeing snowpack totals just under 100% at Moon Pass and Beartown, Slumgolian at 93. As you drift further south, it gets worse. You get down into the Rio Grande drainage, where some of those are like Middle Creek, we're reporting 73% of normal snowpack. As you move further south into the Alamosa and into the Conejos basins, current snowpack 56% at our Lily Pond Snowtell, and then down at the Cumbres Trestle only 65%. One of the things that's real concerning this year, and it has been the whole winter, is what's going on up at Wolf Creek. It's worse this year at Wolf Creek than it was on the same date in 2018. So we're using 2018 as a potential forecast point here in the upper Rio Grande Basin this year. Of course, 2018 was a terrible year. It wasn't as bad as 2002 for runoff. Precipitation was nearly non-existent in those 2 years. So we hope for good precipitation to help us, but we're kind of tracking a 2018 year. Well, up at Wolf Creek, where this says the summit is 66% of normal. If anybody's driven over Wolf Creek lately, particularly from our side over to Pagosa, you just notice the absolute lack of snowpack in the trees anywhere, particularly on the Pagosa side, where that upper San Juan snow tells at only 45% of average. So very, very concerning. As you move to the eastern side, our Sangre de Cristo Mountains are chaotic. I can report to you that at the Snowtell for Trinchera, that one, we're looking at 96% of average right now, but you go a few miles away to the Ute Creek and it's only 30%. For folks who like to visit the Great Sand Dunes National Park, The bad news is that there's only 6% of normal snowpack on the Medno Snowtel. As you move north towards Hayden Pass, that's only 57%. And then in the very far southeast corner of our basin at the Culebra River, that's currently reporting at 74%. So Emily, a mixed bag on the Sangre de Cristo side. It looks like it's going to be below normal over there on the Sangre de Cristos. But depending on which little basin you're in, you may have a little better year than others. Let's talk about our March 1st forecast for runoff. And we anxiously await the recent results of our LIDAR flight that was conducted the last couple of days to give us fresh news. And then we rely on the National Weather Service and the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Thanks very much to those folks who provide these April through September forecasts. But when we look back at the March 1st forecast, we had a low in our basin of the San Antonio River, which is down south of 29% of forecasted normal runoff, all the way to a high of 80%, or 80% for Saguache Creek. So it does get better from north to south, from south to north, it gets better. But these forecasts are almost a month old now. Our snowpack conditions have not increased or improved dramatically. And so I anticipate that our forecasted runoff for April through September in the Rio Grande Basin is going to drop from our March 1st forecast to the April 1st forecast. Reservoir storage is an issue here in this basin right now. Last year, generally a 70 to 80% of normal runoff season further depleted some of our storage vessels. And so, for example, Sanchez, which can hold 100,000 acre feet, has only got 5,000 acre feet in it. The lowest allocation of water released from Sanchez in my career, I've been here about 30 years, is 1 inch, meaning that if you own 120 acre patch, you'll get 10 acre feet of water as your full allocation from Sanchez Reservoir. Mountain Home, Smith reservoirs, only about 20% full on each of those. As you move up, Platoro is in decent shape. It's about 60% of average, or 60% of full right now. But you get into the upper Rio Grande Basin and you have Rio Grande Reservoir at half full, Santa Maria Reservoir at 1/5 full, Continental Reservoir at half full. And so we're a little hamstrung running into what appears to be a dry year. Again, concerned about the weather forecast, showing drier than normal conditions. So right now, here in the upper Rio Grande Basin, we hope we can hold this 70%, the basin-wide 70% of average snowpack, and it's got to keep snowing. This is our snowiest month. So in order for us to just maintain where we're at, Emily, we need to keep having snow. And this has been a dismal year for snowpack accumulation. We had a whole month and a half from December 1st to January 15th where it hardly snowed a speck. And so really concerning year. So again, we're predicting a year in this basin, which would probably result in a top 10 worst runoff season basin-wide. The only positive I can tell you, the precipitation that we got last summer did help the health of our forests. The springs have come back a little bit. Our stream flow was above normal during the winter time, so that helps. So at least what water we do get to run off, maybe it'll carry better to the ditches and head gates that need it so badly.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Emily. And
Yeah.
I'll answer any questions that are asked if anyone has any.
Yeah. I'll open it up to questions from the group.
Still a beautiful place to come. So, for those of you that want to come enjoy our basin, it's been incredibly mild. I'm fearful that we'll become a spring break destination now when people figure out how warm the San Luis Valley is.
Well, we really appreciate the details that you provided, which give us a better picture of how the Rio Grande is looking at the moment. And we know that the indicators are concerning, but we will continue to monitor and be in touch as the spring progresses. So again, we just want to thank you for your time, and this was super enlightening and helpful. So
Thank you.
thanks again. Yeah. All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you all for staying on and participating today. Our next Water Conditions Monitoring Committee meeting will be on April 22nd, I believe. So I will see you all then. Thank you very much.